Well, a little bit of bombshell breaking news on Friday afternoon. First reported by Vince Rigari is that Western United have been stripped of their A-Leagues club licence. This is, Jacob and Christian, the next stage of what has been an extremely tumultuous period for the club. Obviously, we know since their inception and their expansion into the league, there's been a lot of questions about them and their bid. Obviously, a key point being the stadium. But 3 years on from being A-League champions in the A-League men, it appears like they're in serious danger of not continuing their life in this competition. Now, it is very important to note right off the top, there is a means of appeal for this decision. So Western United have 7 days to submit that appeal. And according to Jack Snape for The Guardian, they have indicated that they, of course, will pursue that appeals process. But Jacob, this is just the next step in a long line of troubling news that we've heard out of Western, and we're seriously at the pointy end now.
Yeah, it's, I suppose, kind of the conclusion that most of us were hoping wasn't going to be reached with this situation, and we kept kind of almost trying to gaslight ourselves into thinking that everything was fine. Aloisi wouldn't have signed on if there were, if he knew there was this sort of serious problem. Kucharski wouldn't have signed, Garuccio wouldn't have re-signed. They must be on the right track. And then obviously in the last couple of days, there's been the report about their finances from the 23-24 season, losing $1 million every month, but then people were still trying to find the silver linings of going, well, but that was 2 seasons ago, playing out of Amy with more expensive players in the squad. Maybe it's still going to be fine still, and then this comes out and it's just kind of it just nails it home that things really are not great there at Western at the moment. And it's a shame because we've kind of just been seeing it slowly unravel over the last few months, really since the end of the season. And a lot of us were thinking that Western were one of the teams that this coming season could have pushed on to perform quite well. Obviously finished in the top 4, made a semi-final. Didn't finish top 4, did they actually? They finished... yes, they did.
I don't remember, to be perfectly honest.
I feel like they did.
They did.
Got in, yeah, top 4, made the semi-finals. Did
they host an elimination? Didn't they host?
They did.
They
hosted against Adelaide. Yeah. Top 4, host elimination, make the semi-final, and it kind of felt like we saw a pretty decent showing from them, all things considered, last season, and now. Where they're at serious threat of not even making it to the start line for next season, which is just insane. And it's a worrying sign for every club in the league, I guess, because it just goes to show that you can't take anything for granted in this league, right? It's never going to be easy, and these sorts of things can happen pretty quickly and unravel pretty quickly. So it's pretty worrying stuff.
Christian, first impressions?
Obviously a shock because, as what Jacob said, I've been saying all along that Aloisi, surely he would have had some intel as to before he signed that contract, right? That bit of sense of security, and to have all this news break now, they're basically on the brink of folding, collapsing, and that's scary because we know. We've seen this story play out before with Gold Coast United, North Queensland Fury, those clubs which we thought had huge potential, and they, after only a couple of seasons, folded. They just financially just couldn't cope, and we're seeing the same with Western United. And I think, it's obviously going to be sad if they do fold, but I think the discussion, after the days pass, it'll be, why did they get a license in the first place ahead of some other clubs that were probably more better suited to being in the competition in the first place? It's a very big risk starting a club from scratch. We know, especially with the A-Leagues and the APL, with this, the financial situation, at least, especially over the past couple of years, cutting the distributions to $500,000, for example. There's just all these different things that, you start a club like Western United from scratch, you're going to face some of these difficulties, and it's going to be unfortunate if they're not going to be able to ride this wave and get back on track, because obviously they've got the stadium project, they've got just so many good things going for them, and just to fold now would be just such a shame. So I just feel for all the staff, the players, coaches, fans, just everyone involved with the club. I really feel for them today because it's the most uncertain period since they've been supporting the football club, really. So let's just hope for the best outcome. But no, it's looking pretty bleak, let's be honest.
Yeah, so a bit of the detail in this process here. Clearly, as fans, as media, as clearly people at the club as well have been told a little bit of spinning lies, is what it sounds like, right? Or at the very least, have been given timelines and dates that haven't really been based in reality. And all of these promises have kind of just been dragged on and on and on, and it's forcing people to make decisions. The first stage of that was the Alexander Prijovic debt that they have to pay at some point because of the legal proceedings. They didn't do that by a certain point in time, and that invoked this FIFA transfer ban, or registration ban, I should say, which blocks Jayden Kucharski and Ben Garuccio from playing in the Australia Cup because it wasn't dealt with by that point in time. They are technically, they can wear all the shirts they want, but they are not Western United players at the moment, and that's because Ben Garuccio technically let his contract lapse and became a free agent. So he wasn't an existing player by the rule set. And then, obviously, we hear this announcement of Cam Sports and the fact that they're going to buy the Western Melbourne Group, which encapsulates the club. And that process has dragged on, which meant players were paid late for 3 months in a row.
Yeah.
And just this continuing burden of this process is ongoing, and it still hasn't been ratified, which is, I'm assuming, another reason why Football Australia's first instance board, which is essentially the panel that is tasked with licensing clubs all over the country. They met on Thursday night and determined, this is a quote from a Football Australia spokesperson in the Sydney Morning Herald, determined that Western United FC has failed to meet the criteria required to be granted an A-League licence. As such, Western United FC's licence has been withdrawn, effective immediately. So, on one side, Jacob, it is good that the people tasked with enforcing the laws and the regulations of the game are doing so.
Yeah.
And having that 7-day window for appeal means it's not 100% a done deal yet. However, as we say, it's a really sad state of affairs for everyone involved with the club, the fans, the players, the staff, everyone who's helped build it. And what's most frustrating, as we've continually said, is that the potential of that club is so big and is one of the reasons why we get so frustrated at all the dragged feet that are going on down there.
And it's those fans you mentioned that I feel the most sorry for in all this, because they've copped a lot of flack over the years of you don't get many out to the games, it's not a great atmosphere when you're playing at Amy or all this stuff, and yet you're still getting these really dedicated people turning out week in, week out to watch their team play. And now they're hit with this news that just, my heart goes out to them, because that sucks. But no, it's incredibly frustrating, you're right, Lockie, because it's a case as well of, it's good that the FA are standing their ground and they're taking financial problems and things seriously, and by everything we've heard in reporting, they've been pretty reluctant with the Cam Sports stuff. Not quite sure exactly what it is, but they don't have the best history, that group, with sports investments in the first place, so it could be along similar lines of, well, is it financially stable or suitable for them to be owning a football club? But then it comes to what Christian kind of says earlier, where it's like, this is all well and good to have it now, but where was this all those years ago when you were evaluating the bid in the first place? And it's this idea of potential, and this club could be big, and it's like, yeah, but it requires people to actually put the work in to get it to that point. And so far it's been, like you said, Lockie, it's dragging feet. It's been investments not paying off. It's been property developers. Obviously COVID didn't help with a lot of stuff, we know that, that's fair enough, but it's just the fact that even still, all these years after COVID, there's been absolutely no work done on any of the property development around the site. It's stuff like that. It's like, that's where the entire premise of the club being sustainable came from, and none of that's come up. And so now people are sort of asking, well, was the criteria right in the first place to even let them in the league if you're basing it purely off of potential future investment earnings, a return on investment rather, is that the right way to go about it? It's good that they're standing up and saying now that they've reached a point where it's pretty clear that they can't be a sustainable A-League outfit. But yeah, I think maybe there needs to be some work done to kind of change the approach when admitting teams into the league. And I think we kind of maybe have seen a little bit of that with the Championship, where they've been pretty strong in terms of, this is what we want to see from clubs if you're going to become an inaugural member, and they managed to get the 8 up, and they've done a couple of rounds extra now to try and find the extra 4 clubs to make a 12-team league, and they've been open and said, well, nobody's actually been able to meet our requirements. So maybe they are starting to actually change their outlook a little bit on that. But yeah, it's just disappointing all round for the fans. The players are in a weird spot now, because yes, this is going to be appealed. They've got 7 days to do it, but then how long does the appeal process go on for? It could drag out for months, and by that point you're nearing the start of the season. Do you just cut it loose and start talking to other clubs and keep those doors open, or do you go, no, I believe that things are going to work out, I'm going to stick where I am? How does it work with a player that's still technically under contract, even if they can't be registered? It's just a whole mess. So it's going to be a very interesting next couple of months, I think, while we sort of feel the aftermath of this decision, because it's a big one.
It is. Big picture, Christian, I wonder, there's been a long history of clubs, obviously, having financial difficulty in the league. The Newcastle Jets, the Wellington Phoenix, and so on. They're just the last kind of 5 to 6 years. I wonder, with the precedent that the league has set, and I know this is an FA decision rather than an APL decision. Well, sorry, the APL kind of act on the advice of this board, right? So it is the APL and Stephen Conroy that have actually withdrawn the licence, but they've done so under the advisement of the FA panel. However, the precedent that has been set with pretty much saving clubs where they couldn't have survived on their own, perhaps that's led to a bit of a culture of expecting that and the risk, feeling like the risk is lower if you're going to, I don't even know really how to put this, but if you're in trouble, you'll get saved by someone else. And obviously Western United are being left to their own devices here. And I think in the long term, that's probably a good precedent to set because, for the better of Australian football moving forward. But in some places, they might also be, in some part, a victim of that previous time.
Yeah, and I think it all goes back to the previous point we were saying before, is when these clubs get started up, you've got to be able to say, okay, can this club survive on their own? Do they need extra financial support? If you're saying yes, if you're answering those questions to say yes, then you've got to really reevaluate and say, is this the right club to enter the competition in the first place? Because like Jacob said before, you can have all the value, all the potential in the world, but at the end of the day, if you have that, even that smidget bit of a risk that it could sort of end up in the position that we're faced now, you got to think, is it really worth it? Because you've got so many staff losing jobs now, players, futures uncertain, and not just Western. I mean, like you said, a lot of clubs are in this predicament of like financial difficulty, and you have to wonder, like all these fans, you don't blame if you ask them, like, they're probably thinking to themselves, is my club safe? Are we going to be the next club?
Imagine like Mariners fans right now.
Yeah, exactly right. And so that's just a scary thought for all fans, right? For most clubs. I mean, the Mariners of the world and, the Newcastle Jets. And you've got to remember as well, we haven't even spoken about the women's team. Obviously, that's going to have, obviously massive implications there because we saw the news of Canberra United having the licence renewed. So we thought, that's obviously positive news. And to have a team stripped out of the competition to be let go like that, it's just from a lot of different angles and corners, it's going to be really, really tough pill to swallow. So, it's just scary times. Don't know what else to say.
Yeah, and quite a successful women's side as well. There's still plenty more to come on this. I'm sure the PFA will make a statement at some point. We're yet to hear something officially out of the club. But I imagine given the appeal process taking 7 days, it might take a little while for those to come out. But that's our first reaction to the news. Of course, keep up to date with the Round Ball Australia podcast through the next couple of weeks, and we'll keep you up to date with all the latest developments on this story. We'll see you next time.